Madrid, 1941, the British embassy doors slam shut in the face of a small, balding Spanish man for the third time. Juan Pujol García stands alone on the cobblestone street, rejected again. He has no military training, no connections, no special skills, just an absurd dream to become a spy and help stop Nazi Germany. The British don't want him. They think he's a lunatic, another desperate civilian wasting their time while Europe burns. But Juan Pujol is not deterred. If Britain won't have him, he'll do something unprecedented. He'll walk straight into the German embassy and volunteer to spy for Hitler. Not because he believes in fascism. Juan despises the Nazis with every fiber of his being. No, his plan is far more audacious. He'll convince the Germans he's their most loyal agent in England, build an entire spy network from thin air, and feed them lies that will change the course of World War II. The only problem? Juan has never set foot in Britain. He has no agents, no intelligence, no training whatsoever. What he does have is a second-hand blue guide to England, a library card, and an imagination so vivid it will fool Hitler's high command for 4 years. This is the impossible true story of how a Spanish chicken farmer with no qualifications became Agent Garbo, the greatest double agent in history, and helped win D-Day from a cramped London safe house, orchestrating a phantom network of 27 fictional spies that existed nowhere except in his mind. A man so convincing that Nazi Germany awarded him the Iron Cross while Britain gave him the MBE, making him the only person in World War II to receive the highest honors from both sides. Juan Pujol never fired a gun, never stole a document, never even left his desk, yet his lies saved thousands of Allied lives and helped liberate Europe. How does an ordinary man with no credentials deceive an entire empire? How does fiction become more powerful than truth? The answer lies in the most audacious con job in military history, orchestrated by the most unlikely hero imaginable, a dreamer who understood that in war, the greatest weapon isn't bullets, it's belief. The rejection stings, but it doesn't break him. Juan returns to his modest Madrid apartment where his wife Araceli Gonzalez waits. She's the only person who believes in his wild scheme, the quiet force behind the curtain who will become his co-conspirator in deception. Together, they make an unlikely pair of revolutionaries, a former chicken farmer and a housewife, against the Third Reich. But Juan's hatred for totalitarianism runs deep, forged in the crucible of the Spanish Civil War, where he fought reluctantly on both sides, managing the impossible feat of never firing a single bullet for either Republican or nationalist forces. He emerged from that bloody conflict with one conviction seared into his soul: fascism must be stopped, and if the professionals won't listen to him, he'll become a professional himself on his own terms. The Germans, desperate for intelligence on Britain, are far more receptive than the British ever were. In April 1941, Juan walks into the German embassy in Madrid and spins his first lie. He's a fanatical, pro-Nazi Spanish government official with access to travel to London. They bite. They give him a crash course in espionage, secret writing, code names, tradecraft. They christen him Alaric and send him to England with instructions to build a spy network and report back everything. There's just one problem with their plan. Juan never goes to England. Instead, he moves to Lisbon, buys every book and newspaper about Britain he can find, and starts inventing. He creates fictitious agents out of thin air, describes British locations he's never seen from tourist guidebooks, and manufactures intelligence reports that sound convincing enough to fool the Abwehr. He makes mistakes, telling his German handlers that Glaswegians would do anything for a liter of wine, when any Scot knows whiskey is their drink, but somehow, incredibly, the Germans believe every word. They're so impressed with Alaric that they fund his operations and beg for more intelligence. From a cramped Lisbon apartment, armed with nothing but imagination and audacity, Juan Pujol begins constructing the most elaborate lie in espionage history. And the British, they still have no idea he exists. April 1942, MI6 intercepts strange intelligence reports coming from Lisbon. Someone claiming to operate inside Britain is feeding the Germans information, sometimes accurate, sometimes bizarrely wrong, but always detailed enough to seem legitimate. British intelligence officers grow concerned. Who is this mysterious agent working for the Nazis inside their homeland? They begin investigating, trying to identify the leak. It never occurs to them that the agent in Britain is actually in Portugal, has never visited the UK, and is desperately trying to contact them. Finally, Juan Pujol's wife, Araceli, takes matters into her own hands. She marches into the US embassy and pleads her husband's case. The Americans listen, they contact MI6, and suddenly, after a year of rejection, British intelligence becomes very interested in the odd Spaniard who's been catfishing the German spy network. They smuggle Juan, Araceli, and their young son to London under false identities in April 1942. MI5 takes over his case, assigning him to Tommy Harris, a Spanish-speaking intelligence officer who will become his partner in deception. When they meet, Harris immediately recognizes something rare. Juan isn't just imaginative, he's a natural storyteller with an intuitive grasp of psychology and an obsessive attention to detail. The partnership is electric. Harris has the training and resources. Juan has the vision and voice. Together, they will expand Juan's fictional network into the most elaborate counterintelligence operation in history. They give him a new codename, Garbo, after Greta Garbo, because he's the greatest actor in the world. The German intelligence service, the Abwehr, still believes Garbo is their loyal spy in London, operating independently. They have no idea British intelligence now controls every word he sends them. Harris and Pujol set to work systematically expanding the fictional spy network. By 1944, Garbo's network includes 27 distinct agents, each with complete backstories, personalities, motivations, and communication methods. There's Agent 3, a wealthy Venezuelan living in Glasgow, educated at the university, Garbo's deputy and most trusted lieutenant. Agent 5, 3's adventurous brother, a restless commercial traveler who supposedly undertook a dangerous secret mission to the heavily guarded Isle of Wight, then smuggled himself to Canada to set up operations there. Agent 7, a British soldier in the 9th Armored Division, nicknamed the Panda Division, feeding military intelligence. Then there's the indiscreet American sergeant who gossips about troop movements, the Welsh nationalist fascist leading the Brothers of the Aryan World Order in Swansea, and dozens more, all completely fictitious. None of these people exist. They're characters in an elaborate fiction created from thin air and maintained through meticulous record-keeping. Harris and Pujol write 315 letters averaging 2,000 words each, all in Garbo's distinctive voice, verbose, fanatically pro-Nazi, breathlessly dedicated to the Führer's New World Order. The tone is crucial. It must sound authentic, emotionally resonant, ideologically committed. One channels the fascist rhetoric he learned to despise during the Spanish Civil War, performing fascism so convincingly that the Germans never question his loyalty. The operation grows staggeringly complex. Each fictional agent must maintain consistent behavior patterns, communication styles, and reporting schedules. If Agent 3 reports from Glasgow, his intel must reflect accurate details about Scottish geography and culture, details Harris and Pujol research obsessively. If Agent 5 travels from England to Canada, the timeline must be plausible, the journey documented, the cover story bulletproof. The German intelligence officers in Madrid become so overwhelmed with the flood of information from Garbo's network that they stop trying to recruit additional spies in Britain. Why bother? Garbo gives them everything they need: detailed reports on military installations, troop movements, industrial production, civilian morale. The intelligence is a carefully calibrated mixture of truth and fiction. Harris and Pujol provide genuine information, but always delayed just enough to be militarily useless. In 1942, Garbo reports a convoy of Allied ships leaving the Clyde bound for North Africa, painted in distinctive Mediterranean camouflage. The intelligence is accurate and impressive. There's just one catch: the letter is postmarked before the Operation Torch landings, but arrives in Germany too late for the Nazis to act on it. The Germans are thrilled. "We are sorry they arrived too late," they write back, "but your last reports were magnificent." Garbo's credibility skyrockets. He's becoming their star agent, the spy they trust above all others, which makes him the perfect weapon for the Allies' most ambitious deception yet. By August 1943, the operation evolves further. Garbo invents a new member of his network, a radio mechanic willing to discreetly transmit messages. Suddenly, Garbo's intelligence shifts from slow airmail letters to rapid radio transmissions, sometimes multiple messages per day. This exponentially increases the volume of intelligence flooding German headquarters. The Nazis are drowning in data from their most trusted source, and every single word is a lie calibrated to serve Allied interests. The Germans trust Garbo so completely they begin paying him substantial funds, eventually $340,000, to maintain and expand his network. MI5 allows Pujol to keep half the money after the war, payment for services rendered. It's the ultimate irony. Nazi Germany is financing its own deception, funding the operation that will help destroy it. From an MI5 safe house at 35 Crespigny Gardens in Hendon, London, Juan Pujol sits at a desk and weaves his web. He never parachutes behind enemy lines, never sneaks through checkpoints, never picks a lock or photographs a document. He simply writes and talks and invents, creating an entire shadow world that exists only in German imagination. And in January 1944, when Berlin asks Garbo for intelligence about the coming Allied invasion of Europe, he's ready to deliver his masterpiece. The Germans believe the Allies are planning Operation Overlord, the invasion of occupied Europe. They're right. What they don't know is that the Allies have prepared something else. Operation Fortitude, the most elaborate military deception in history. And Agent Garbo, the chicken farmer who never left home, will be at its center. The stage is set. After years of carefully building trust, cultivating credibility, and proving his worth through a mix of accurate but delayed intelligence and plausible fabrications, Garbo has become Berlin's most valued spy. His reports go directly to German high command. Hitler himself reads updates from Garbo's network. The Germans trust him more than their own reconnaissance, more than intercepted communications, more than aerial photography. In the paranoid, conspiracy-laden world of Nazi intelligence, Garbo is the one source they believe unconditionally, and that blind faith is about to cost them the war. January 1944. The message from Berlin is urgent. German high command believes the Allies are preparing for a massive invasion of occupied Europe. They need Garbo to dedicate all resources to discovering where and when it will happen. The request is exactly what MI5 has been waiting for. The Allies are indeed planning Operation Overlord, the invasion that will land on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. But there's a second operation, one the Germans must never discover: Operation Fortitude, an intricate deception designed to convince Nazi commanders that the real invasion will strike at Pas-de-Calais, 150 miles northeast of the actual landing zones. The Calais deception makes strategic sense. The part of Calais is the narrowest point between England and France, only 21 miles across the English Channel. It's the most obvious invasion route, the one Hitler himself believes will be the target. If the Allies can convince the Germans that Calais is the real objective, Nazi forces will remain concentrated there even after Normandy landings begin, buying precious time for Allied troops to establish a beachhead. Agent Garbo becomes the centerpiece of this deception. Between January and June 6, 1944, Garbo sends over 500 radio messages to Madrid, an average of 4 transmissions per day. The messages come from across his network. Agent 3 in Glasgow reports Scottish units preparing for mobilization. Agent 7 with the 9th Armoured Division describes training exercises. The Welsh fascist group claims to have observed American troops massing in southeastern England. Each message is a puzzle piece, seemingly disconnected, but collectively pointing toward one conclusion. The invasion force is gathering in Kent and Essex directly across from Pas de Calais. At the heart of the deception is a phantom army, the first United States Army Group, or FUSAG. On paper, FUSAG comprises 11 divisions, roughly 150,000 men, under the command of General George S. Patton, one of America's most famous and feared tank commanders. The Germans respect and fear Patton. If he's leading FUSAG, it must be the real invasion force. There's just one problem: FUSAG doesn't exist. The divisions are fictional. The tanks are inflatable rubber decoys. The radio traffic is fabricated. The entire army group is a ghost, visible only through carefully staged photographs, fake radio chatter, and Garbo's intelligence reports. Other Allied double agents contribute pieces to the puzzle, but Garbo is the star. The source, Berlin, trusts most. His reports meticulously document FUSAG's preparations, troop movements, supply accumulations, morale assessments, readiness levels. Every detail is calculated to seem authentic. Harris and Pujol research actual military procedures, terminology, and logistics to make the fiction bulletproof. The Germans swallow it completely. They redirect reconnaissance flights toward Kent and Essex. They position forces to defend Calais. They believe FUSAG is real because Garbo says it's real, and Garbo has never been wrong, except Garbo has always been wrong. Every single thing he's told them is a lie, but the lies are so consistent, so detailed, so carefully layered that they've become more convincing than truth. The Germans trust fiction more than their own eyes. As D-Day approaches, the pressure intensifies. Harris and Pujol craft increasingly urgent messages from Garbo's network. On June 5th, 1944, the day before the invasion, they arrange for Garbo to send a critical alert. He needs to transmit an urgent message at 3 a.m. on June 6th. An agent in Southampton has observed something big. Troops are receiving embarkation kits, including vomit bags for seasickness. The invasion is imminent, and it's heading toward Normandy. It's the most important message of the war, the one warning that could devastate Allied plans. There's just one catch. The German radio operator doesn't show up for the scheduled 3 a.m. transmission. Nobody's listening. The message goes unsent. When the Normandy landings begin, hours later, the Germans are caught off guard. And Garbo? He's furious. He sends a blistering message to his German handlers expressing outrage and disgust. "I cannot accept excuses or negligence. Were it not for my ideals, I would abandon the work." The anger is performative, but it serves its purpose. The Germans are mortified. They apologize profusely. They assure Garbo his dedication is appreciated and beg him not to quit. They promise it will never happen again. Most importantly, they credit him for trying to warn them, reinforcing his credibility precisely when it matters most, because Garbo's greatest work isn't warning about Normandy. It's convincing the Germans that Normandy doesn't matter. June 9th, 1944, 3 days after D-Day, with Allied forces struggling to expand their Normandy beachhead against fierce German resistance, Garbo sends the most important message of his career. It's long, urgent, and marked for immediate delivery to German High Command. Garbo reports he's met with his agents and analyzed the situation. His conclusion is definitive: Normandy is a diversion. The real invasion is still coming at Pas de Calais. Look at the evidence, Garbo argues. General Patton's fusag hasn't moved from southeastern England. The force that landed in Normandy is too small to be the main invasion army. The Normandy beaches are strategically inferior to Calais. Everything points to the same conclusion. The Allies are sacrificing troops in Normandy to draw German forces away from Calais, where the real invasion will strike. Hold position. Don't reinforce Normandy. Wait for Patton. The message is a masterpiece of persuasion, blending fabricated intelligence with psychological manipulation. It tells the Germans exactly what Hitler wants to believe, that his instinct about Calais was correct all along, that Normandy is a feint, that patience will be rewarded. German High Command accepts the analysis completely. They keep 2 armored divisions and 19 infantry divisions in Pas-de-Calais throughout July and August 1944, waiting for an invasion that will never come. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the German commander-in-chief, becomes so convinced by Garbo's intelligence that he overrules General Erwin Rommel's request to move divisions from Calais to Normandy. Those forces could have turned the tide of battle. Their absence allows the Allies to establish and expand their beachhead, eventually breaking out across France. As military historians later note, the intervention of those Calais divisions in Normandy really might have tipped the balance toward German victory. Agent Garbo's lie saves the invasion. A fiction told from London defeats reality on the battlefield. On July 29th, 1944, Garbo receives a message from Berlin for his extraordinary services to Germany. The Führer himself has awarded him the Iron Cross, one of Nazi Germany's highest honors. Harris and Pujol compose Garbo's response, dripping with false humility. He expresses humble thanks for an honor for which he is truly unworthy. It's the ultimate irony. Adolf Hitler personally decorated the man who defeated him, never knowing the truth. The chicken farmer from Barcelona who hated fascism is now a Nazi hero. Months later, in December 1944, MI5 Director General Sir David Petrie presents Juan Pujol with the MBE, member of the Order of the British Empire, in recognition of his services to Britain. Juan Pujol García becomes the only person in World War II to receive the highest honors from both sides of the conflict, a medal from each army, one for truth, one for lies, and nobody except the British knows they're the same person. But even as victory approaches, danger lurks. In September 1944, MI5 receives intelligence suggesting Garbo's cover might be blown. Someone may have discovered he's a British double agent. The Germans could know. If they do, Garbo could be targeted for assassination, not by the Nazis he betrayed, but by Nazi sympathizers seeking revenge. The decision is made. Garbo must disappear. The final transmissions from Agent Garbo's network continue into late 1944, even after Juan Pujol himself goes underground. Agent 3, Garbo's fictional deputy in Glasgow, takes over operations from MI5 headquarters. Tommy Harris and other intelligence officers continue sending misleading reports directly to German intelligence, maintaining the deception until the war's end. The Germans never stop trusting Garbo. Even after Nazi Germany collapses in May 1945, even after concentration camps are liberated and the full horror of the Holocaust is revealed. Even after Hitler commits suicide in his Berlin bunker, German intelligence officers still believe Garbo was their loyal spy. They never learned the truth. In the chaos of war's end, they never discovered they'd been deceived for 4 years by a Spanish chicken farmer who never left his desk. That ignorance becomes dangerous. MI5 realizes that die-hard Nazis might seek revenge against collaborators and spies after the war. If former Abwehr officers discover Garbo's true identity, Juan Pujol and his family could be targeted for assassination. The threat is real enough that MI5 decides on an extraordinary measure. They will fake Juan Pujol's death. In 1949, British intelligence spreads rumors that Garbo has died. Some versions claim malaria in Angola. Others say a snake bite in Mozambique. The details are deliberately vague and contradictory, making the story harder to verify but convincing enough to discourage investigation. Juan, Araceli, and their 3 children, Juan, Jorge, and Maria Eugenia, are given new identities and smuggled out of Europe. They settle in Venezuela, a country far enough from Europe's lingering conflicts to offer safety. Venezuela, early 1950s. Juan Pujol, the man who helped win World War II, teaches English to Venezuelan employees of Shell Oil Company. He's patient, quiet, unremarkable, a middle-aged language teacher with a Spanish accent and no apparent history. Nobody knows he once deceived Nazi Germany. Nobody recognizes him as Agent Garbo. He keeps his secret, absolutely, telling no one about his past life. The isolation is intentional but corrosive. Araceli struggles to adapt to their new life in South America. She's far from home, unable to contact family, living under a false identity in a foreign country where she doesn't speak the language fluently. The strain proves unbearable. After years of being Juan's essential partner, the woman who first convinced the Americans to take him seriously, who supported his wild plan, who believed in him when no one else would, Araceli finds she can't continue living in exile. The marriage dissolves. Juan and Araceli separate, both with MI5's cooperation to maintain their cover stories. Araceli returns to Madrid under her new identity. She remarries, this time to Edward Chrysler, an American businessman with political and diplomatic connections who had once been a body double for silent film star Rudolph Valentino. Together they found an art gallery, Chrysler Gallery, becoming fixtures of Madrid's cultural scene. Araceli never publishes her memoirs. She keeps the secret of her role in Operation Fortitude until her death in 1990, taking her story to the grave. Juan remains in Venezuela, building a new life from scratch. He opens a stationery store and bookshop called La Casa del Regalo, the House of Gifts. It's modest work, a dramatic come-down for the man who once held the fate of D-Day in his hands. He marries again to Carmen Celia Alvarez and has 3 more children, Maria Elena, Carlos Miguel, and Juan Carlos. His new family knows nothing about his past. To them, he's simply a Spanish immigrant who came to Venezuela after World War II. Like thousands of others fleeing Europe's devastation, Juan teaches his children, runs his shop, lives quietly. The memories of Agent Garbo, of Tommy Harris, of fake radio transmissions and phantom armies fade into private history. His older children, Juan Jorge and Maria Eugenia, the ones he had with Araceli, believe their father died in Africa in 1949. They mourn him, never knowing he's alive in Caracas. Juan carries that grief silently, the price of safety. For 35 years, from 1949 to 1984, Juan Pujol García is a ghost. The world's greatest double agent has successfully pulled off his final deception. Disappearing into ordinary life, British writer and military historian Nigel West, pen name of Rupert Allison, is researching World War II intelligence operations. He's investigating Operation Fortitude and the double agents who made it possible. Most of them are dead now, their stories documented in declassified files. But one puzzles him. Agent Garbo, the star of the operation, supposedly died in 1949, except West can't find a death certificate. The circumstances are vague, the location uncertain. It's almost as if West begins investigating in earnest. He traces records, contacts retired intelligence officers, follows paper trails across continents, and eventually, incredibly, he discovers the truth. Juan Pujol García is still alive. He's been living in Venezuela under an assumed name for 35 years, running a bookshop in Caracas. West contacts him after decades of silence. Juan finally has the chance to tell his story. The two collaborate on a book that will reveal Operation Garbo to the world. In 1985, they publish Operation Garbo under Juan's real name, his first time using it publicly in nearly 4 decades. The book becomes a sensation. The man the world thought was dead is suddenly famous, his story finally told. The British government formally acknowledges his service. He returns to England for the first time since the war ended, meeting surviving MI5 colleagues and receiving public recognition. One is reunited with his first family, the children who thought he was dead. It's an emotional, complicated reunion. His older children learn their father didn't die in Africa. He abandoned them for a new family in South America. The truth is messy, painful, and incomplete. There are no easy reconciliations, but eventually both families meet and Juan's two separate lives finally intersect. In 1988, Juan Pujol García dies in Caracas, Venezuela from a stroke. He's 76 years old. By then, his story has been told, not fully perhaps, because some secrets died with Tommy Harris in 1964 and others with Araceli in 1990, but enough for history to remember him. He's recognized as one of World War II's most important figures, a man who helped save countless lives without firing a shot. In 2000, he's honored with the English Heritage Blue Plaque at 35 Crespigny Road in Hendon, the MI5 safe house where he orchestrated his deceptions. The inscription reads, Juan Pujol García, 1912-1988, secret agent codename Garbo, lived and worked here. A small memorial for an extraordinary life. The man who never left home helped liberate a continent. The lies he told from that London safe house kept German forces away from Normandy long enough for the Allies to establish their foothold in occupied Europe. Military historians credit Operation Fortitude with shortening the war and saving thousands of Allied lives. And at the center of that operation was a balding, boring, unsmiling Spanish man with no training, no qualifications, and nothing but imagination. Juan Pujol proved that in war, the most powerful weapon isn't technology or firepower, it's story. A convincing narrative can defeat armies. A well-told lie can save the world. The official histories call him the greatest double agent of World War II. But perhaps he was something more, the greatest storyteller, a man who understood that reality is what people believe it to be. He made the Nazis believe in phantom armies, fictional spies, and imaginary intelligence until their belief became more powerful than truth. He turned fiction into strategy, imagination into victory, and then, when it was over, he vanished back into ordinariness, teaching English, selling books, living quietly until history finally caught up with him. To understand what Juan Pujol accomplished, you have to understand what he was up against. The most sophisticated, paranoid, ruthless intelligence apparatus in history. Nazi Germany's Abwehr wasn't staffed by fools. These were trained intelligence professionals, experienced in counter-espionage, skilled at detecting deception. They had broken Allied codes, penetrated resistance networks, and caught numerous real spies. They were good at their job, and Juan Pujol fooled them completely for 4 years. How? The answer reveals something profound about human psychology, institutional bias, and the nature of belief itself. The Abwehr wanted to believe in Garbo because he confirmed their expectations. He told them what they already thought was true, that Britain was vulnerable, that German intelligence was superior, that the Reich would prevail. Garbo's reports reinforced Nazi ideology and validated German strategy. In an authoritarian system where disagreeing with leadership could be fatal, intelligence that confirmed Hitler's intuitions was rewarded and promoted. Intelligence that contradicted the Führer's beliefs was ignored or suppressed. This created a systematic bias toward accepting information that fit the narrative and rejecting information that didn't. Garbo exploited this bias perfectly. He never challenged German assumptions. He reinforced them. When Hitler believed the invasion would strike at Calais, Garbo provided evidence supporting that belief. When the Germans suspected British military strength was concentrated in southeastern England, Garbo confirmed it. He was the intelligence source that told them what they wanted to hear, making him invaluable and trusted. But validation alone wouldn't have been enough. Garbo succeeded because of extraordinary attention to detail. Every message he sent was researched, fact-checked, and calibrated for maximum plausibility. Harrison Pujol studied British geography, military organization, cultural habits, and industrial production. They read newspapers, analyzed radio broadcasts, and consulted military manuals. When Garbo described a location, the details were accurate. When he reported troop movements, the unit designations were real. When he discussed British morale, he cited actual news events. This mixture of truth and fiction was crucial. If Garbo had sent only fabrications, the Germans would have detected inconsistencies, but by embedding lies within a matrix of verifiable truth, he made the lies invisible. The Germans could fact-check parts of his reports and find them accurate, leading them to trust the parts they couldn't verify. It's a classic confidence technique. Establish credibility through truth, then exploit that credibility to sell fiction. Garbo was essentially running a long con on Nazi intelligence, and like all successful con artists, he understood that the key is making the mark believe they're the smart one, that they've discovered something valuable others have missed. The Germans thought they had the greatest spy network in Britain. In reality, they had nothing, but their belief in that nothing shaped their strategic decisions with catastrophic consequences. The fictional agents themselves were masterpieces of character development. Each one had a complete backstory, personality, motivation, and voice. Agent 3 wasn't just a spy in Glasgow. He was a wealthy Venezuelan educated at the University of Glasgow, cultured and sophisticated, fluent in English with family properties in Venezuela near Cumaná and Caracas. He was Garbo's most trusted deputy, eventually taking over the network during Garbo's disappearance in 1944. His letters were signed Pedro and written in eloquent English, reflecting his cosmopolitan background. The Germans came to regard him as a capable substitute for Garbo himself. Agent 5, 3's brother, was a restless adventurer, the reckless sibling who took dangerous risks. His story included a dramatic secret infiltration of the Isle of Wight, a heavily guarded island that would have been nearly impossible to access, described in such vivid, novel-like detail that the Germans loved it despite its implausibility. It played into their romantic notions of espionage, the daring agent sneaking past security, gathering vital intelligence at great personal risk. Later, Agent 5 smuggled himself to Canada and set up a sub-network there, expanding Garbo's reach across the Atlantic. The Welsh nationalist leading the Brothers of the Aryan World Order in Swansea was a different character entirely, an ideological zealot, a British fascist who hated his own government. His motivations were political rather than mercenary, making him believable as someone who would betray Britain to the Nazis. Each character served a specific narrative purpose, and appealed, to different German assumptions about who might spy for them. Together, they created a fictional ecosystem that felt real because it was diverse, complex, and internally consistent. Harris and Pujol maintained this elaborate fiction through obsessive record-keeping. They kept detailed files on each fictional agent, timelines of their activities, copies of every message sent, notes on their character traits and relationships. If Agent 5 reported from Toronto in March, they noted it. If Agent 3 traveled from Glasgow to London, they tracked the dates and justification. Continuity was essential. A single contradiction could unravel years of deception. The Germans were reading every word carefully, cross-referencing information, looking for patterns. Harris and Pujol had to be equally careful, ensuring that every detail aligned with everything they'd said before. It was like writing a novel in real time with hundreds of characters across years, with the lives of thousands depending on getting every detail right. The cognitive load was immense. They were essentially running 27 separate cover identities simultaneously, each with its own voice, perspective, and reliability level. Some agents were presented as highly reliable. Others were deliberately shown to make occasional mistakes, adding realism. Some were well-positioned to access military intelligence. Others provided second-hand rumors and civilian gossip. The variation made the network seem authentic. Real spy networks are messy, with agents of varying quality and access. The radio operator character, introduced in 1943, was particularly clever. By inventing a technician willing to transmit messages discreetly, Harris and Pujol solved a logistical problem while adding credibility. Radio communication was faster than airmail letters, allowing for more responsive intelligence sharing. It also explained how Garbo could send multiple messages daily without raising suspicion about how he was physically mailing so many letters. The Germans accepted this development naturally because it solved a problem they'd been wondering about. How was Garbo getting so much information to them so quickly? The radio operator answer made sense, and it allowed MI5 to flood German intelligence with information, overwhelming their analytical capacity. By 1944, Berlin was receiving so much data from Garbo's network that they struggled to process it all exactly as intended. Information overload can be as effective as information denial. If you give an enemy too much data, they can't distinguish signal from noise. Every message from Garbo was noise, but it was carefully crafted noise that sounded like signal, creating a false picture that the Germans mistook for reality. The Germans' payment of $340,000 to Garbo over the course of the war is one of history's greatest ironies. Nazi Germany was financing the operation designed to destroy it, paying the man who would help ensure its defeat. MI5 allowed Pujol to keep half the money after the war, an unprecedented arrangement that recognized his extraordinary contribution. But it's also darkly funny. The Reich was literally paying for its own deception, funding phantom agents who didn't exist to provide intelligence that was fiction. Every dollar they sent to Garbo was a dollar invested in their own demise. It's the ultimate con, making the victim pay for the privilege of being deceived. And the Germans never even questioned it. They believed Garbo needed the money to maintain his network, pay his agents, cover expenses. They trusted him so completely that they sent funds without demanding detailed accounting. In reality, that money went to MI5, which used it to fund actual intelligence operations against Germany. The Nazis were funding British espionage while believing they were funding their own. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Operation Garbo was its psychological sophistication. Harris and Pujol weren't just feeding false information, they were manipulating German decision-making at the highest levels. The June 9, 1944 message convincing German High Command that Normandy was a diversion wasn't simply a lie. It was a masterclass in persuasion. It gave the Germans an explanation for events that had already surprised them. After D-Day, Nazi commanders were confused. Why had the Allies landed in Normandy, a strategically inferior location? Garbo provided an answer that made sense within their worldview. It was a trick, a diversion, a sacrificial gambit. The real invasion was still coming at Calais, exactly where Hitler had predicted. This explanation allowed German commanders to save face. They hadn't been wrong about Calais. The Allies were just being devious. Hitler's strategic instincts had been correct all along. Garbo's message reinforced institutional ego and ideological commitment, making it psychologically irresistible. Accepting it meant the German high command hadn't failed. They'd correctly predicted Allied strategy, but been temporarily deceived by tactical misdirection. Rejecting it meant admitting they'd been fundamentally wrong, that the Führer's intuition was faulty, that perhaps they didn't understand Allied thinking at all. In an authoritarian system where admitting error could be fatal, the former option was far more attractive, so they chose to believe the lie. They kept divisions at Calais, they waited for Patton, and the Allies broke out from Normandy. The Operation Fortitude deception succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Military historians have called it the most successful strategic deception in history. It didn't just delay German response to D-Day, it fundamentally shaped German strategy for months after the invasion began. Those divisions held at Calais could have devastated Allied forces during the critical early days of the Normandy campaign when the beachhead was most vulnerable. Their absence allowed the Allies to consolidate, reinforce, and eventually break through German defenses. By the time Berlin realized Normandy was the real invasion and no secondary attack was coming at Calais, it was too late. Allied forces had established an unbreakable foothold in France. The liberation of Western Europe had begun, and a Spanish chicken farmer who never fired a gun had helped make it possible. Juan Pujol's contribution to victory is impossible to quantify precisely. How many lives did his deception save? How many days did it shorten the war? But historians agree his impact was substantial. Without Operation Fortitude, D-Day might have failed. Without Garbo, Operation Fortitude would have been far less effective. The Germans trusted him more than any other intelligence source. His voice carried weight that no one else's did. He was the keystone of the deception, the source that made everything else believable. Remove him from the equation, and the entire operation becomes less convincing, less successful, less decisive. But beyond his tactical contributions, Juan Pujol represents something deeper about World War II, that ordinary people could make extraordinary differences. He wasn't a trained soldier, seasoned spy, or experienced intelligence officer. He was a hotel manager turned chicken farmer with a conscience and an imagination. He had no special skills, no insider knowledge, no connections. What he had was conviction, a belief that fascism must be stopped, combined with a refusal to accept no as an answer. When Britain rejected him, he didn't give up. When the obvious path was closed, he found an unconventional one. He walked into enemy headquarters and volunteered, then turned that access into a weapon against them. He improvised, adapted, and persisted. His success proves that creativity, determination, and moral courage can rival firepower and technology as instruments of warfare. The German military machine had superior tanks, experienced commanders, and entrenched defenses, but it couldn't withstand a well-crafted story told by a committed believer. Juan Pujol defeated divisions with fiction, turned imagination into strategy, and changed history from a desk. That's a different kind of heroism than battlefield valor, but no less significant. In the annals of World War II, a conflict remembered for massive battles, technological innovation, and great leaders, The humble Spanish man who never left home stands as proof that individual action matters, that one person's choices can ripple across continents, and that sometimes the pen truly is mightier than the sword, or in Juan's case, the typewriter and radio transmitter. The legacy of Agent Garbo extends beyond World War II into the evolution of modern intelligence operations. Juan Pujol's success demonstrated that strategic deception could be as valuable as accurate intelligence gathering. Before Operation Fortitude, military deception was often tactical and localized camouflage, dummy positions, false radio traffic designed to confuse immediate battlefield opponents. What Harris and Pujol pioneered was strategic deception at the national level, a comprehensive, long-term operation designed to shape enemy decision-making at the highest echelons of command. This approach influenced Cold War intelligence doctrine. Both the CIA and KGB studied Operation Garbo as a template for how double agents could be used not just to gather information, but to feed misinformation that shaped adversary behavior. The concept of controlling the opposition's intelligence picture, making an enemy see the world as you want them to see it, became a fundamental principle of modern espionage. Juan Pujol proved it could work at scale with war-winning consequences. His methods also highlighted the importance of psychological operations and understanding institutional bias. Modern intelligence analysis now explicitly accounts for cognitive biases that make analysts susceptible to deception, confirmation bias, groupthink, authority bias. These vulnerabilities were present in Nazi Germany's intelligence services and exploited brilliantly by Garbo. Today's intelligence professionals study Operation Garbo as both inspiration and warning. Inspiration for what strategic deception can achieve, warning about how institutional culture can make organizations vulnerable to believing comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. Juan Pujol's story also raises complex ethical questions about deception, loyalty, and identity. He lied professionally for 4 years, maintaining multiple false identities, deceiving people who trusted him, living a double life that required constant performance. That psychological burden was immense. After the war, he struggled with his identity. Was he Juan Pujol, the Spanish civilian, Agent Garbo, the British spy, Alaric, the Nazi agent? His post-war decision to fake his death and live under an assumed name in Venezuela suggests deep ambivalence about his wartime role. He saved lives through deception, but deception exacts a psychological cost. Living as a lie, even for righteous purposes, damages the soul. His marriage to Araceli didn't survive the transition to peacetime. The partnership, forged in shared deception, couldn't sustain ordinary domestic life. His children from that marriage believed him dead for 35 years, an abandonment that served security but caused profound pain. When they were finally reunited in 1984, the emotions were complicated. Relief, joy, but also anger, confusion, and grief for the decades lost. Juan's decision to start a new family in Venezuela, keeping his past secret, even from his second wife and children, shows how thoroughly his spy identity had fragmented his sense of self. He couldn't integrate his wartime experiences with normal life, so he compartmentalized, creating separate identities that never fully merged. This psychological complexity makes Juan Pujol a fascinating character beyond his intelligence achievements. He wasn't a natural liar or con man by all accounts. He was a decent, morally serious person who hated the deception he performed. He did it because he believed it was necessary, because fascism had to be stopped, because his conscience demanded action. That tension between moral conviction and immoral means defines his story. He lied to serve truth, deceived to serve justice, wore masks to preserve his authentic self. The contradictions were never fully resolved. Even in his autobiography, published in 1985, he expressed ambivalence about his wartime actions. He was proud of his contribution to victory, but haunted by the deception it required. He saved lives, but lived a lie. He helped liberate Europe, but couldn't free himself from the aliases that protected and imprisoned him. This psychological depth distinguishes Juan from the mythologized spies of popular culture, the James Bonds and Jason Bournes, who effortlessly inhabit false identities without internal conflict. Real espionage exacts real costs. Juan Pujol paid them for decades after the war ended. The technical aspects of his tradecraft also merit recognition. Creating and maintaining 27 fictional identities without modern technology, no computers, no databases, just paper files and human memory was an extraordinary feat of organization. Harris and Pujol developed meticulous systems for tracking each agent's history, communications, and relationships. They created character profiles, timelines, and interaction maps. They rehearsed each agent's voice so radio transmissions sounded authentic. This pre-digital information management was as impressive as the deception itself. They essentially built a fictional universe and maintained its internal consistency across thousands of messages over 4 years. Any contradiction could have exposed the entire operation, ending their usefulness and potentially endangering their lives. The pressure was immense, the margin for error non-existent, yet they never slipped, never broke character, never allowed the fiction to crumble. That discipline and attention to detail under extreme stress demonstrates rare professionalism and mental resilience. Tommy Harris deserves equal recognition as Juan's partner in this achievement. Harris provided the professional expertise, institutional resources, and operational security that Juan lacked. He translated Juan's imaginative ideas into actionable intelligence products, navigated MI5 bureaucracy to secure resources, coordinated with military planners to ensure deception efforts aligned with operational objectives, and protected Juan from exposure. The partnership worked because their skills complemented each other perfectly. Juan brought creativity, intuition, and authentic voice. Harris brought training, discipline, and strategic thinking. Neither could have achieved what they did alone. Harris's tragic death in a 1964 car crash in Majorca meant much of the operational detail died with him, leaving gaps in the historical record. But his contribution to Allied victory was as significant as Juan's, even if less publicly recognized. The MI5 case files released in 1999 reveal Harris's brilliance as a case officer and his deep respect for Juan as both agent and friend. Their relationship transcended professional collaboration. They genuinely liked and trusted each other, a rapport that made their fictional creations more believable because